My name's Jonathan Martin, and I'm here to talk with you about a new series called People from the Future that Renovatus will debut this weekend, both for our first ever Saturday night service in Fort Mill, South Carolina at the Broadcast Group, as well as our campus in West Charlotte on Little Rock Road. The premise basically goes like this. All of us are familiar with some form of science fiction. We all have grown up with stories about what's going to happen at the end of the world. In my case, I found that not only I grew up on the science fiction that came from the culture, but also science fiction that kind of came my way through the church. For example, I didn't grow up knowing anything about David Bowie or his song Space Oddity. I had no knowledge whatsoever of Ground Control to Major Tom. However, I did grow up knowing about Larry Norman, who did a song called UFO, where he describes the return of Jesus as being like an unidentified flying object. Instead of watching movies in a theater about zombies at the end of the world, we watch movies in church about the end of the world. It's understandable that in a world as violent as our own, with all of the challenges that we're facing, that we would have these questions about what's going to happen at the end. But I'm convinced that in many cases, we miss out on the even more fundamental question that the Gospels would pose to us, which is really not so much what's going to happen at the end of the world, or even necessarily what's going to happen in the future. The question I believe we get in the Gospels themselves is primarily this one. What are we going to do now that the future is already breaking into the present? In Matthew's Gospel in particular, we get this incredible image of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Alongside of that, there is all sorts of apocalyptic images. There are earthquakes, there's lightning, there are literally dead corpses that are walking around the city. When dead people are walking around, the future is no longer a distant, speculative thing. The future has already arrived. I believe that the early Christians saw the resurrection of Jesus as a prototype for a whole new way of becoming human. Sure, they believed that Jesus was completely unique as the only begotten Son of God, but they didn't believe that what happened to him in resurrection was unique at all. That's why they would get baptized naked and spit in the direction of Satan and all sorts of other outrageous things, because they believed that they were now already beginning to participate in the death and resurrection of Jesus, and that in doing so, that they were becoming human in a different way. In the next 4 weeks, People from the Future will walk us through what it would look like to become human in all the ways that Jesus said that we could. Not what it would be to be superhuman, but what it is to become fully human. How it is that now we can have authentic relationships in a world where so often we feel cut off from each other. How we can give and receive touch where in many cases we feel so profoundly isolated. These early practices of the church that bring the life-altering power of resurrection life into our present. I believe that we're living in what one social critic calls an empire of illusion, where not only are we constantly captivated by different screens and different forms of media, but we're finding that the technology that was supposed to bring us closer together is actually driving us further and further apart. When we have so many different competing voices out there all screaming for our attention, I'm convinced that many of us have no idea who we really are. We have no sense of identity. We have no sense of who it is that God's created us to be. That's why I think it's so crucial that we learn together what it is to become human in all the ways that Jesus said that we could. It's not just that we know the things that we like to do. It's not just that we know what our interests are, that I like to listen to Jay-Z, or I like to eat at a certain kind of restaurant, or I know what sports teams I root for, but rather that we find out who we really are and what God's called us to become. That's why we need so much to rediscover this new way of being human, where really what we're going to see is not so much this thing where God loves you and has a wonderful plan for your life, but more like this. God loves you, and He has a plan to violently disrupt life as you have known it. It's possible now to rebel against your own indifference and become a completely different kind of human. Jesus Himself was the prototype for this new way of being human, and it's actually possible to become human in all the ways that He was. It's possible to break away from the relentlessly monotonous trappings of modern life and to become someone else. Curiously enough, in becoming something you've never been, you may find that you end up being more yourself than you were before. It's possible to find your place in this resistance movement of liars, dreamers, and misfits that are reshaping the cosmos and overthrowing the world. It's the assumption of this series that Resurrection Life wants to come barreling down on you, that God's future wants to break into your present, that it's possible now for you to live a life of such alien gentleness that people around you might actually become a little bit afraid of what's happening to you. People from the Future is really all about what it is to be human. And I'm convinced that in the world we're living in right now, becoming human is the whole ballgame.